In Proverbs 25, verses 1 through 15, the overall counsel is that God's wisdom gives us the humility to know our place. This lesson is really hard for us because we're in a Western individualistic culture that doesn't really like people in positions of authority. We believe that we are the highest authority in our life. And in a democracy, all of us have an equal voice. And so everyone's opinion matters just as much as everyone else's. But the problem is that gives us an inflated sense of self-importance. And while it's certainly true that all of us have equal value and worth to God, we don't all have an equal place in society. And there are people above us that we need to show respect for. And we need to know our role and stay in our lane. In verse 1, this is the start to collection 5 of the 7 collections in Proverbs. This collection will take us all the way to the end of Proverbs 29. And these were Proverbs of Solomon collected almost 300 years later by men under King Hezekiah. In 1 Kings 4 and verse 32, we learn that Solomon spoke 3,000 proverbs. And if you add up all of the Proverbs of Solomon in the book of Proverbs, it only adds up to 500 or 600. So it makes sense that you had all these Proverbs of Solomon that were recorded and then later compiled in these collections. And this would have especially been helpful in King Hezekiah's day, which was a time of spiritual renewal and reformation in Judah. And so how fitting to begin this collection with a reminder of our place in society. Because if people don't know their place, they're not going to follow King Hezekiah. And if they don't follow King Hezekiah, they're not going to follow God, who King Hezekiah is trying to get his nation to serve. So he reminds them of the greatness of God and the greatness of his kings in verse 2. God's glory and greatness is found in the mysteries that he conceals from us. We often say God works in mysterious ways. And when we say that, we should be saying that with a sense of awe and reverence and an understanding that he is God and we are not. Whereas for kings, his glory is to search out matters, to investigate and make inquiry about God's created world as he educates himself on the way things work in the universe, but also all the investigation of things in his kingdom and with international affairs, so he can get to the root causes of conflicts and problems in his kingdom. And that's why the heart of kings in verse 3 is so unsearchable. And if we're humble enough to know our place, we would realize, I do not want to be a king. It's been said, heavy lies the head that wears the crown. And if we're wise, we'll have the humility to realize there's no way we can understand all that's going on in the mind and heart of the king, because he knows things we don't. And he's dealing with responsibilities hundreds of times more stressful than anything that we have to face. And in verses 4 and 5, if we're humble, we'll realize how difficult the king's job is, because he's constantly dealing with wicked people in his own court and in the kingdom at large. And sometimes in our pride, we don't know our place. And so we spend all of our time criticizing the king instead of helping the king to accomplish his purposes, which is to root out evil from the kingdom and to be good, righteous citizens ourselves so that he can reign in righteousness without obstruction. In verses 6 and 7, when we have the humility to know our place, we won't act like we're more important than we actually are. It's much better that you let the king lift you up and tell you you're great, rather than trying to seize greatness for yourself. Sometimes in our pride, in verses 8 through 10, we're quick to take people to court. We're quick to say, this guy wronged me, and we bring him into the king to make our case. But then we end up humiliated because we jumped to conclusions, and we were wrong about what happened. Instead, Solomon says, work this out yourself. Don't go broadcasting this problem to the public, because if it gets out that you were wrong and you just slandered your neighbor, your reputation will be ruined forever. In verse 11, when we have the humility to know our place, our words will be perfectly fitting for the circumstance, because we won't be trying to one-up people. We won't be tearing people down with our words just to build ourselves up. Not only that, but because we have no agenda to move ourselves up the social ladder, we'll be willing in verse 12 to become a wise reprover. We will be willing to speak truth to our neighbor and to the king, even if they don't like what we have to say, because we're not speaking to manipulate people into putting us into a position of honor. By God's wisdom, we know who we are and we know who we're not. And we're not trying to be someone greater than we are. We're just trying to be ourselves and to honor God and to speak truth truth, come what may. And in verse 13, when we have the humility to know our place, we'll be willing to let people send us on errands. Some people are too prideful to do grunt work and to be someone's messenger. But actually, even the most menial task, when done well, is refreshing to those who sent you. Apparently, the time of harvest was extremely hot in Palestine, and it would not be snowing, but they would take snow from the mountains and transport it down and store it in caves where they could keep their drinks cold. And so someone with the humility to do their job, even though it's not the most glamorous, but they do it well, it refreshes the ones who hired them like ice cold water on a sweltering day. But if, on the other hand, in verse 14, we make a promise to give someone a gift and then we go back on that promise, it's like clouds and wind without rain. You get everybody's hopes up, maybe because you just want everyone to think that you're generous, and then you make up some excuse for why you couldn't be generous in this case. And so again, it's about vying for position instead of knowing our place and realizing if I don't have the money or the access to a gift like this, then I need to not tell people that I'm going to deliver it. It's much better to under-promise and over-deliver than to over-promise and under-deliver. And finally, in verse 15, if you have the humility to know your place, then when you speak to a ruler, you'll be persuasive because you'll speak to him with humility and not assume you know better how to run the kingdom than he does. And that ruler will be patient and show you forbearance because of your humble attitude in his presence. And so the challenge for us is to be very slow to criticize those who are in authority over us. This is why politics can be so maddening, because when we listen to the news or political podcasts, we're thinking, if I were the president, I would do this way differently and I would fix all of these problems. But in reality, we have no idea how hard that job is and all of the things that he has to keep track of, and how every move that he makes will set off a domino effect of 100 other things that are hard to even foresee. I honestly have no idea how presidents ever sleep, because they must feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. But this doesn't just go for the president. This also goes for the elders at the church. Be very slow to assume if you were an elder, you would handle situations so much better. Again, I don't know how our elders sleep, because they have the weight of souls on their shoulders. And so rather than criticizing them and undermining them behind their backs, we should be trying to help them in whatever way we can to work together to make things smoother in the local church and to get more involved and to root out wickedness from our lives. The heart of shepherds in a local church is unsearchable. So let's have the humility to know our place, to respect those in positions above us, and to not act like we're greater than we really are. And this all points to Christ in a couple of ways. Number one, Jesus quoted from Proverbs 25, verses 6 and 7, when he saw Pharisees taking places of honor at a banquet in Luke 14. And he also quotes from verses 8 and 9 in Matthew 5, when he warns us about being angry with our brother and being quick to bring people to court. But the most amazing way this points to Jesus is that Jesus actually was greater than we are. He was so great that John the Baptist said, "Look, I'm just a voice. I'm not him. He's so great, I'm not even worthy to untie the strap of his sandal." And yet Jesus, who was greater than us, had the humility to treat us as if we were greater than he. Paul said in Philippians 2:7, he emptied himself and took the form of a bondservant, which is someone with the lowest possible place in society. He was willing to take the lowest seat possible. And because of that humility, in verse 9, Paul says, "For this reason also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name." Jesus showed us the path to the highest place is to take the lowest place. So as we call on God for wisdom today, our prayer is, Father, help me know who I am and who I am not. Help me understand there are things too great for me so that I won't be constantly criticizing the way you run the universe, or the way political leaders run their countries, or the way the shepherds run the local church. But instead, I will know my place. And instead of exalting myself, I will wait for the ultimate exaltation in Christ that only comes from you.